Hello, Atari enthusiasts. My name is SuperPet98, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the Atari Jaguar library. I have a whole bunch of ideas that I think would have helped the Jaguar's life in 1993 and 1994, and some in 1995. Just these video game ideas I came up with, and box art that I created for concepts of games that I wish came out in 1994 and 1993, and I think it really would have helped the Jaguar. This is kind of me like rewriting history. Us retro gamers do that all the time, and I feel really inspired to make this video. Show to you guys, all you Atari Jaguar fans out there, you 1%ers. This video is for you. This is my ultimate tribute. This is the super tribute to the Atari Jaguar. And I made my own custom box art and everything. So I have 22 games. Some are a combination of completely new ideas I came up with my own personal box art that I made, and some are unreleased games that I think should have been released, and some are games that were released on the PS1 and stuff and the 3DO that I think should have gotten released on the Atari Jaguar. So here we go. Without further ado, this is what should have / could have been released for the Atari Jaguar back in the mid-90s.
Get bit by Jaguar.
Okay, so number one we have Centipede 2000. This was a PS1 game from the year 1998, and I think it would have been awesome if it came out on the Jaguar instead, if I could rewrite history. This is my own custom box art I made, and I changed the title to not just Centipede, but Centipede 2000. Because that was a trend during the Jaguar's life. You got Breakout 2000, Defender 2000, Tempest 2000, right? Well, why not Centipede 2000? Wouldn't have this been a really amazing idea? And what's interesting is that Atari made a bunch of these retro remakes during the PS1 era after the Jaguar died. And what's kind of funny is that all those retro remakes they made on the PS1, these are the kind of games that should have came out for the Jaguar, actually. So I think this would have been cool, and even though it was a 1998 release, this could easily have been a game that was released in 1994 for the Jaguar. I tried to make the box art as true to the original box arts for the Atari Jaguar games as possible. So anyway, that's my first idea. Let's move on.
Jaguar.
Crystal Castles 3D. Yes, this is my concept idea of what if there was a Bentley Bear 3D platformer on the Atari Jaguar. This could have came out in 1994. Bentley Bear is the mascot for Atari. He's had a bunch of games, and his original arcade game was Crystal Castles. He also did actually appear on the Jaguar in Atari Carts, and he's right there on the cover. In fact, in Atari Carts, he's the only official Atari character. All the other racers were completely made up for the game, which is completely stupid. They had all these other characters that could have been racers in Atari Carts, but this is a whole other discussion. Like, you even could have had the Centipede be a racer in Atari Carts. But anyway, so imagine if this came out in 1994. It could have been, 32-bit, 64-bit, right, Jaguar. You could have Bentley Bear in 3D running around collecting the red gems like he did in the original Crystal Castles arcade game, right? And this could have been the first 3D platformer ever made. This could have predated Mario 64 and all the other early first 3D platformers. So this could have been revolutionary. And again, I know it was difficult to program for the Jag, but imagine if they just made like 6 levels and they had 2 bosses, and then give it some great music, and then call it a day. This would have blew people's minds, and it would have made Bentley Bear a household name, or a name that people identify with Atari. This character of Bentley Bear. Bentley Bear is one of the most underrated video game mascots of all time, and the most underutilized. Although nowadays, with the new upcoming release of the Atari 7800 Plus, they're including Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest, or whatever it's called, which was originally just a fan game made by an Atari fan. But now it's getting an official release with the console. So it seems like now they're structuring Bentley Bear to be the mascot for Atari. Meanwhile, back in the day, when people thought of a mascot for Atari that could exist, people thought of Bentley Bear. And there was one other character I forget, but Bentley Bear was a perfect kind of character. He's an animal, he's cool looking, he's like a wizard or whatever. But anyway, just imagine if this came out in 1994, and it could have been really something special.
With 64 bits, 3D graphics, real-world animation, and lightning speed that you can only get with Jaguar, which is more advanced!
So this is my third idea. What if they released Tempest 2000 Multiplayer Edition? Yes, on a single cartridge, and it's Tempest with 4 people. And imagine if the game included the Jaguar Team Tap with the game. It could have been in a little bit of a fatter box, and it could have included the Team Tap. So all you had to do was buy 2 other controllers yourself, and now you could play Tempest with 3 people. Or if you really want to go all the way, get a 4th controller. And Atari could have lowered the prices of the controllers for because of the knowledge of them releasing these kinds of games. This also could have came out in 1994, since I believe Tempest 2000 was a 1993 release. And also, I really would have wished if the Jaguar had 4 controller ports right in the front, so that you wouldn't even need a Team Tap. But the N64 was the game console that revolutionized 4-player gaming. But anyway, imagine if this existed. It would have helped the sales of the Jaguar, it would have gotten people talking. I think it would have been pretty special and, neat and extremely fun, Yeah, anyway. So moving on.
I'm a 64-bit Jaguar.
My 4th idea, and I know you guys are all going to love this. Imagine this a game idea, okay? This comes out in, say, 95 maybe? Or the same year even. If they really worked hard, imagine if they made Predators versus Aliens multiplayer. Imagine that. And you could have, this would be like the early version of GoldenEye and the N64 game. And people would have loved this. People would have just absolutely thought this was amazing. I don't know what else to say. Like, also, this could have included the Team Tap as well. Just some ways, some incentive to get fans to try to play multiplayer games on the Jaguar. Plus, multiplayer 3D games in 93, 94, that really would have helped the Jag stand out compared to the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. And also, Atari could have predated Nintendo with the whole 4-player mayhem kinds of games, like Mario Party and Smash Brothers. Atari could have done it first. But Atari was a little too stuck in the past. They didn't make games that were innovative enough, like they used to. They tried, they tried. But I think my ideas are quite honestly a lot better. Okay, here's the next idea I have. iRobot. So this actually is a Atari arcade game from the mid-80s. And it was a 3D game. And one of the first 3D arcade games, or one of the first 3D games, period. It was really cool, and the graphics were strange and interesting, and the game was a good game. It was fun. But imagine if they just released this for the Jaguar. I mean, why not? It looks like it's a 64-bit, 32-bit Jaguar title. Not everyone got to play iRobot when it came out in the early 80s, and it wasn't a hit arcade game. It's basically like a lost gem. But for those of you who never got to play it, here it is. A full arcade port to the Jaguar. Just imagine how amazing this could have been. I mean, this is an example of something that Atari just had in their library that they could just release right on the Jaguar. And it would have been a novelty, too. And it would have helped this game get recognition. And it's just amazing, because when I was doing research for this, it's like I remembered that iRobot, like it's even a Atari game. They don't even have to license this out to anyone. They own this. So why didn't this get a release on the Jaguar? You know why? Because I wasn't working for Atari back in the mid-90s, that's why. So anyway, Yeah, also, one last thing to mention. You know how strange this is? How this arcade game is called iRobot? Doesn't that remind you guys of that Will Smith movie, iRobot? Right? Isn't that bizarre? That 2000s movie? They both have the same exact title. Strange, right? Anyway, but iRobot the arcade game came out way before iRobot the movie. So, I don't know if they took that name from this or they came up with it and it's just a coincidence, but whatever. Okay, here's another idea. And this really isn't my idea. There does exist some like 30-second gameplay footage of what was supposed to be Joust on the Atari Jaguar, a 3D version, and it looks frickin' amazing. And it was canceled. Why? I have no frickin' idea, but it looked extremely fun. It could have been 4 players, and you could have death matches and everything. This is my custom-made artwork for what the game cover could have been. I kind of didn't like the original title it was going to be. I forgot what it was. So I decided I like the title Joust 2000 better. Fits in line with the other stuff. Also, this could have put Joust, on the map again, got people to remember Joust even more, and also it could have made Joust a better game, because I kind of love Joust, but it's just hard as hell, but it's charming as hell too, so that's why I love it. Yeah, imagine this. Joust 2000 on the Jaguar. If Atari really had all their Easter eggs in the basket, they could have really worked hard to get this out as a regular Jaguar title in 1994. It's more important to get games out for the Jaguar in 94 and not 95, because by the time 95 came around, the PS1 was coming out, and even the Sega Saturn, even though the Saturn should have been released in 96, but still. So you could have actually had the Jaguar, they could have had 1994 on lockdown, and they could have dominated the scene. And then the Jaguar 2 could have came out in 1996, actually. And 1995, if they really worked hard on the Jag, they actually could have still kept making games for the Jaguar in 1995. And this is only on the precedent that 1994 was extremely successful for them, and the Jaguar really could have changed the industry. They could have kept making games still for the Jag in 1995. Why? Because even though the PS1 games graphically were better than the Jag, even still, the PS1 graphics for 1995 games, they're not that much superior to the Jag games, in my opinion. So you actually could have still had the Jag be a decent competitor to the PS1 and the Sega Saturn in 1995. They still could have sold consoles if they made these kind of ideas that I'm coming up with here. Yeah, so anyway, that's Joust 2000, a game we will never see. But hell, Atari is making a comeback nowadays in the 2020s, right? All you Atari fans know that. So why can't they make this now? Why not? They should go back to these old ideas and make these new Atari games, Okay, next title idea. Q*bert, a 3D release of the Q*bert game for the Atari Jaguar. This was a PS1 title, and it was also released on the Dreamcast. So this game actually did come out. It's a great game, and it's basically a 3D remake of the original Q*bert. One of the most underrated game characters, Q*bert. I love Q*bert. But anyway, imagine if this came out on the Jaguar. It could have actually been released in 1995, and why not? When people associate those old arcade games from the glory years of the 80s, even if it's not an Atari game, people still associate, just in general, a lot of the big arcade hits with Atari. So if this came out for the Jag in 1995, then it could have made people reminisce about Q*bert and all that kind of stuff. It's just a simple idea where this really could have just been released as well. And I think this Q*bert game was released actually in like 98 or 99. But again, just like Centipede that I mentioned for the PS1, this easily could have been a game that could have been released in 1995 anyway. This is kind of like a fantasy thing. Imagine if Q*bert, that 90s remake, came out in 95 instead. Then it could have had an Atari release. I also, not to toot my own horn, but I really like that I added the curse word, speech bubble, coming out of the Atari logo on the side, because Q*bert actually was the first video game character to curse. Yes, decades before Grand Theft Auto and everything else, and Conker's Bad Fur Day, Q*bert was the first guy that vented in a video game, and he cursed whenever he died. And that was pretty interesting and a little bit controversial at the time. So Kubert had a foul mouth back in the day. And that's one of the things that makes him such a cool and interesting character, aside from his design. Alright, so anyway, moving on. Imagine this. Rampage World Tour, released for the Atari Jaguar. Rampage World Tour happens to be one of my favorite video games of all time. I frickin' love this game. I played it to death as a kid. And I love the fact that it was released in the late 90s, because that was when I was growing up, playing the N64, PS1, and all that amazing stuff. You know, Spyro the Dragon, Crash, Gex the Gecko, all that great stuff. Amazing stuff. So I'm happy it was released during my time, during the late 90s, but even still, imagine if this is another game where this could have been released in 1995. Like, it's possible. And this is also if history was rewritten, of course. And imagine how amazing this could have been if this was a Atari Jaguar release, you know? And plus, it was also an arcade game, and it feels like the style of the old Atari video game style anyway. Plus, the graphics are pretty perfect for a Jag title. But that's not what happened, so whatever. Okay, imagine this. Galaxian 3, Project Dragoon. So, this was actually an arcade game released in the early 90s, and it's the third Galaxian game. It's something that very few people know about. I was looking at the graphics, and considering the date of its release as an early arcade game from the early 90s, why couldn't have this been released on the Jaguar? Why not? The graphics are perfect for it. Plus, it's an exclusive arcade game that could only work as a release for the Jag. Or maybe the 3DO. But still, imagine if this was a Jaguar exclusive. It could have been interesting. It could have sold quite well. Maybe not extremely well, but it could have gotten a cult following, and the graphics for it were just perfect. Okay, next title. Total Eclipse Turbo. This is a great game from the early 1990s. It's like a shooter game, and I just love the graphics for this game. This became one of the best 3DO titles, and it was an early 3DO title, if I recall correctly. I think it was released in 1995 or 94 or something like that. But imagine if it came out on the Jaguar. Why not? The graphics are perfect for the Jaguar. It could have been another amazing, great space shooter for the Jag. The box art is pretty perfect for a Jaguar title. Yeah, I don't know. It's just an idea I had. And also, this was made by Crystal Dynamics, which is one of my favorite old video game companies. Why? Because their mascot was Gex back in the day. And I just love how I added Gex on the Crystal Dynamics logo here on the box art. Because back in the day, in the early 1990s, and even the late 90s, Gex was on the Crystal Dynamics logo for the company. That was back when they actually gave a shit about their mascot, before they completely abandoned him.
Get bit by Jag.